Hello, Michael.
Hello, how are you, Ashley?
I am doing very well. It is wonderful to see you. Hello, friends who are watching from YouTube. I see everybody streaming in. Just as we're giving folks a minute to tune in, would love for those of you who are here now to let us know. Type in the comments, can you see us? Can you hear us? And also, where are you tuning in from today?
Did we do this
Uh,
right? Do we know
did
how to
we?
do online things? Are we okay with
Uh,
it?
Michael and I were just talking about how remarkable it is that we've been doing video technology now for a year and miraculously have just not gotten any better at it. So let us know. All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm guessing that there is some animation affiliation there in Calgary.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we've got some Canadians representing. All right, thank you, JD, digital artist. Appreciate the. They looks like folks can see us and hear us, so we're starting off okay. Um, my name is Ashley with the Discover team at Teachable. It is wonderful to have all of you here. I am very excited to have with us today somebody who has spent a lifetime not just exploring different types of visual and animated art, but also developed the ability to build tools and teach others how to approach that type of art without the intimidation and the kind of friction that will often keep people like me, for example, away from those things because I'm intimidated by all the things I don't know how to do. Um, but I love animation, and I have always been very curious about the mechanics of how we make computer animation work. And today, folks, you are going to get a peek behind the curtain. And some exposure to some tools that can help you create your own computer animations, learning how to, like some foundational building blocks, how to create different environments. So no better person to teach us this information than Michael Tanzillo, who, like, I mean, co-founder of the Academy of Animated Arts. You're currently heading up training at Blue Sky? Is that right, Michael?
Well, I've actually made a move. I'm working at Adobe now,
Adobe.
but yeah,
All
but I
right.
was I was at Blue Sky Studios for a little over 12 years. Yeah.
Which is amazing. So, in addition to like honing these skills, my guess is that you've spent a lot of time thinking long and hard about the best way for new artists or folks who are maybe shifting mediums to really learn techniques and build those foundational skills.
Yeah.
Audience, feel free to type your questions in the chat. Keep them coming. I'll be monitoring throughout Michael's presentation. So. If you have anything that you want to share, would love to know where you are and what motivated you to join us here today. What are you hoping to learn? And we'll make sure that we chat about those things as we're listening to Michael. There will be a replay available, and you can access Michael's course through the link that is pinned to the top of your YouTube page. So check that out. And without any further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Michael.
Hi, thanks so much. So as Ashley was saying, my name is Mike Tanzillo. Um, I've been working in the field of computer animation and animated films for, like I said, 13, 14 years now. I spent the majority of my time at Blue Sky Studios, worked on over 10 films there. As I started off as a render wrangler, which, as anyone knows, is the guy who checks make sure the computers are still on in the middle of the night. I started doing that and worked my way up to an artist role. And I was a lighting artist, which, if you don't know what that means, that's totally fine. I'll explain that in a minute. But I was a lighting artist on feature films, on 10 feature films there. Towards the end of my time at Blue Sky Studios, I became the head of training. So the training head, it's the person who, whenever you get ready for a film, there's always artistic challenges. There's always artistic things you need to look into. And so, as my job of the head of training was to get the artists prepared for each project and get new hires prepared for the film. For the last few months, I've made a switch over to working at Adobe. Adobe's starting some new 3D software that is meant to, we like to say it democratizes the 3D process, makes it available for more people, and just kind of opens up the world of 3D, which has been my goal because I know how much this industry has changed me. It's changed as a confused kid who didn't know, that had a creative part of his brain and a little bit technical part of his brain, who didn't know exactly what he wanted to do. Animation has been a dream come true. And so for me, it's about translating that to other people. Outside of my work in the industry, I've also, as Ashley said, I'm the co-founder of the Academy of Animated Art, which is an online school. Right now, we mostly dedicate our training towards lighting and an introduction to the 3D softwares I'm going to show today. But we're growing right now. We're gonna build some animation courses by the end of the year. We're gonna build a whole big robust library of stuff moving forward. Additionally, I am the co-author of Lighting for Animation. It's a book that my Academy of Animated Art co-founder Jasmine Katatakarn and I wrote together. And so I've been thinking about the way of teaching animation for a very long time. And so I'm very, very excited to share some of this with you today. So I'm going to skip back and forth a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and kind of talk you through the process a little bit. The first thing that I want to do, let's see, first thing that I want to do, let's see, I can share. All right.
Which one you want to share?
Can you guys see my screen okay? Can you see?
You have this up? 3D production pipeline?
Yes.
There cool. We go. We Great. Got it.
Deal. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to talk you guys through the entire pipeline of how an animated film gets made. I'm going to jump into this software. This is Maya. The link in the comments leads to my Intro to Maya course that talks through this software. We're going to go through this a little bit. I'm going to show you some texturing and some ability to add some, to make some characters and some objects look a little bit differently in this software. And then ultimately, I'm going to show you guys how we can go from start to finish with this image. So like I said, this isn't meant to be a hands-on demonstration where you're going to be following along. It's meant to be just kind of like a broad overview where I can show you guys some different techniques and just some a little taste of you will. So to get started, it's really important to understand how an animated film gets made. So how it goes from an idea to the final production. So I'm just going to kind of weave my way down. You can see this kind of goes back and forth and wraps around here. So starting up front here, we have an idea, which is just how anything else gets started. A director, a filmmaker comes up with an idea of something that they want to make. And this is this and the story are the thing that drives every artist on an animated film. So we're all dedicated to making this idea into the final output. From the idea starting point, it goes to a story, and all story is literally, you see a little guy pointing at index cards. It's just the ideas written out and literally pinned on a Post-it on a board with index cards around a room, and the director is able to talk through the story a little bit. Then it goes to a storyboard process, which is individual drawings of like just kind of roughing out what's going to happen. And then all of those individual drawings get pieced together into a film with some rough voiceover work. And actually, I'm going to show you guys, actually, if you don't mind, stop sharing. If you wouldn't mind pulling up the, it looks like a little drawing video. Actually, the other one, sorry, there's two down there. Not this one, other one, sorry. So this is a rough idea of what a storyboard and an animatic is. So what you're seeing on the right-hand side are the storyboard drawings. This is just the artist and the director working with what they're called storyboard artists, the people who do these little thumbnail sketches, to give everybody an idea of what the story is going to look like visually on the screen. And then you'll see in the upper left-hand side the final film from the original Toy Story there. So this is the first time that anybody at the studio, anybody in the world starts to get a visual idea of what the film is going to look like. So if you could stop doing that, I'll share my screen again. Sorry, I'm going to make it hop around just a little bit here at the beginning. And then I promise I won't do that too much. Okay. Let's see. Okay. And then we go on from the animatic point into the design element. because this is something that I never thought about, which was that now that you have these storyboards, you have to design the characters. You have to design the world that they live in. They don't just, stuff just doesn't magically happen. Like, I remember one of our hardest ones that we did, I worked on the Peanuts movie. And one of the most difficult things was translating Charlie Brown and the kids from being 2D comic book characters into 3D space. And I remember we did the first one where it's like, okay, it's got this big round head. And then we designed him in drawings, and then we had a sculptor on staff who actually built him in 3D space. And the first time we looked at him, like modeled out, we're like, he looks strange. Like, that's a strange looking kid. We can't do that. So we had to modify the design so that it stayed true to his original, but also made sense in a 3D environment a little bit. So then we move on down here. There's layout, which is taking the kind of like a rough. It's not even like the final characters. It's like just kind of blocks and kind of proxy characters, and just kind of laying them out, putting the cameras in place, just getting an understanding of the scene, and then we start modeling it, which is actually building the final characters. And it's almost like building a sculpture, right? And then the texture is, and the texturing on top of that is making those models have the physical qualities and the physical elements that make it look like the final thing. So, it could be just a sphere is the model, but is that a glass sphere? Is that a sphere made of wood or concrete or aluminum? So texturing is making the object have the material properties that you want. And then we have rigging and setup, which is basically giving the characters that are being modeled a skeletal structure, things to push, pull, move around a little bit. And then we have animation. So everybody, when they're thinking about animated films, I did this too. I thought that everybody who worked on them was animators, but animators are this one section of the film who actually do the performance. And this is the last video I'll make Ashley share. Is that the last one there? And then I'll stop going down the vortex of sharing the screen. Okay. The one in the middle, sorry. Perfect. So this is one of my favorite all time, and I just found out about this recently. So this is from the film Big Hero 6, and this was an animation test. And this is just getting the characters' personalities to read through animation. So the artist had the same task with different characters. It was like, just have them come in the room and sit down in the chair. Now, based on the characters' personalities, based on who they are, defines the way that they move through the room, defines the way they pull out the chair, defines the way are they confident? Are they intimidated? Are they like Aunt Cass, who's always balancing 7 things at once? Are they comfortable in the space? Are they comfortable in their own skin? Like you saw Betamax, like unable to sit down in the chair. Go-Go is super confident, so she just flips the chairs around. She doesn't care who's in the room. She doesn't care who's not in the room. And I just love that it's all the same thing. It's all the same. It would be the same animatic. It would be the same storyboard. It would be the same thing written on the card. Wasabi walks in the room and sits down. But it's up to the animator to give that motion a performance that kind of helps the audience understand who it is, who these characters are, and like what it is, basically what it is that motivates them. So I just love this because, again, this is something that when I work with animation students, like these types of simple tasks are the kind of the bread and butter of all that. So, okay, cool. Thank you, Ashley. I'm just gonna share my screen.
What, can I ask a question about that? When you say a test, do you mean for characterization or for animators themselves?
What do you mean, like as a test for them?
Like testing to see who might be the right animator for the job?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily the right animator for the job. It's testing the character themselves, like seeing how they move. Because like when you have a film, there are anywhere from 30 to 150 animators working on any project. And so there's always like a lead to each character, and then that person and that group of people help determine, what does the character look like when they're confused? What do they look like when they're happy? What do they look like when, and they kind of set these rules. So these tests help determine the rules of not only, because all of their personality traits are written down, right? They're confident, they're sheepish, they're shy. But how does that actually manifest itself? How does a shy character hold their hands? And one of my favorites is we worked on the movie Rio, and we brought in a bird handler because we told her, we're like, hey, we're working with this blue macaw. We would love to see how a macaw functions and moves around a space. And we brought in the handler. And the thing is that we had plenty of footage of macaws. We knew exactly how macaws moved. We did not know how a human being who is comfortable with macaws interacts with a bird. We don't know how bird handlers behave. So this woman was in there and like showing off the bird and like showing and I don't know if she ever realized that nobody was looking at the bird, that everybody was looking at her. So so it's like how do you move it between your hand? How do you praise them? How do you like what do you have them on your shoulder like a pirate? Are they on your arm? Like we didn't know any of that stuff. So that was very, very telling. Or like lots of it is, like you'll have a fight sequence with samurais, right? And a lot, of course, it's like you want to see how they hold the sword and the moves that they want to do, but like also like what do they do when they're just standing around? Like do they rest their hand on the thing? Like it's all these kind of small motions that really help tell the story.
So to Nicola Mason's question about the inspirations being based on real life, sounds like yes, there's a lot of real life influence there.
There is. There's literally a gamut that we set up in terms of we call it photorealism versus stylized is the general terms for them. So photorealism is trying to mimic reality as best you can. Stylized is like, something like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is very stylized. It's much more of a comic book style. And what we'll do early on in the process is literally a director will say, from 1 to 10, like how photoreal do we want to be on the photoreal side or do we want to be on the stylized side? And like Rio, when we were building that world, I remember there was a row of buildings and one of them was photoreal. And then as you went down the list, they got more wobbly. And by the end, they looked like a Dr. Seuss book where they're all janky and all of these crazy curves. And we were literally like with the director, like, where do you want this world to live? Exactly. So once we defined that defined the way the cars looked, the way the buildings looked, and the way the characters moved. So like, it is real, but it's exaggerated at times. So it'll be like, right. If do I just like stand up from my chair going like this, or do I really like dig down and like bounce my body up like that? That's kind of, but there is the basis in reality because you want the audience to connect and have an understanding with these characters.
Well, and all of those elements, we have a couple more questions in here too. Like, does the color palette just describe the personality? And it seems like those things are tools that the team has at their disposal to help with the storytelling, right? The light, you have experience in lighting design and color palettes and the types of movements. It seems like those are all different tools in your toolbox to decide how you want to tell the story.
Yeah, and each film has a color language. So we did a film called Epic where it was a battle between it was a battle in the forest between these. Essentially, it was to break it down entirely. It was a battle between life and death. Like it was life in the forest versus rot and decay in the forest. So there were these guys that were trying to do the things that were going to make the forest thrive, and then there were these bugs, these boggins that were designed to put like disease and things and to like rot trees.
Destruction.
So every hero character had a green color palette or a yellow or like some sort of like warm earth tone. Every bad character was in the blue color palette. Another film that we just did, Spies in Disguise was the last film that I worked on that was released. Yeah, and we had a few different color palettes. So the main characters worked for like basically a CIA type spy agency with the U.S. government. There were two. There were them, and they were like the color of their cars, the color of, like they all had this what we called agency blue, which was kind of a cyan bluish color. And so that was something that accented everything they did, whether it was like a laser scanning them, that was blue. If anything, the potion they were drinking was blue. Everything about it was blue. the bad guys were all
tied
red.
to the agency.
Yeah. So everything was like you knew without knowing it that it was tied to the agency. Oh, I worked in this industry too long and I have too many stories. In the Emperor's New Groove, this is a good one too. There's a pink potion that the Emperor drinks to turn into the llama.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't work on that film because it came out when I was in like junior high, but I used to work with somebody who did, and he tells the story of so the potion is very pink, and they wanted the audience to associate that color with any time the potion was kind of taking hold. So like, and they actually did a thing when the potion was being introduced that they subtly shifted the color palette to a cooler bluer, like shot by shot by shot by shot by shot, little by little by little, so that when the pink potion was introduced, it was like boom, and it like hit the audience in the face and really kind of shook you visually a little bit. So there's
like a filter, like an Instagram filter,
totally
related to modern day, modern social media terms.
Yeah, it totally it's like, so we definitely, I wish anyone who's interested in this industry, I wish I could take them to where these conversations are happening about, again, like about color palette and how much thought goes into not only the characters' design and the way they move, but like the visual language of the film. And like there are all these rules that we have that we know that people aren't going to notice them, but we know that you'll feel it when you watch the film.
Yeah, they contribute to a larger whole.
Yeah.
Of the story. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I'm gonna hop in to Maya a little bit and kind of show you all around.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's share the screen. All right. So this is Maya. It's the most intimidating software I've ever opened in my life. When I opened it the very first time, it's not the super user friendly version ever, but I don't want you to get overwhelmed if you ever open this. Again, we have a whole class that takes you through step by step. I like to think that I am pretty good at teaching it because Jasmine and I specifically are good at teaching this stuff because we were not naturally good at this out of the gate. It took time. And Jasmine tells the story of, here, I'll show you that. So like, you've got this object here in the middle and you can kind of spin the camera around. And the first time she says that she was in the software, she spun the camera around so much, she made herself nauseated and she had to walk out of the room. So it's not a good start to the software. But I like to start people off very slowly. So the basics of this are, we've got, like I showed you a little bit, we've got this workspace in the middle, and this is where everything gets built. This is where all your objects get started from. This is where they all get constructed. All of that happens in here. You saw me kind of do it. Everything up here is your creation bar. So anything up here is like, this is where you're either going to select a tool or you're going to select an object to be placed into your scene. You can see here, you can either go up to create and grab these simple objects like a sphere or a cube or a cone. And once you select those, they appear in your space, and then you can see me start to kind of move them around. This moving them around interactively is cool, and I'll show you more about that. But just to move on to the next section over here, let me make this a little bigger so hopefully you can maybe see this. This is the parameters section. So let's take the sphere for a second. If we move it back, let's delete these guys. Let's take this sphere and we're going to move it back to the center. So it's at 0, 0, 0, which is right in the middle of the image. We can rotate it. Actually, rotating a sphere just looks like itself. Let me show you. So you can rotate it around, and as you rotate it, these numbers will change. And so you can either do it interactively or you can change it here. The scale is exactly what you think it'll be. It'll make it bigger or smaller. And so that's the basic gist of this area over here. This is just the area where you will change the attributes about the object. You can do it interactively, like I said in here. Most 3D software has this kind of widget thing in the middle which allows you to either move this back and forth. And you can see I'm selecting these arrows to slide them around. You can scale them, make them bigger and smaller this way. Or you can rotate them, as I was showing you guys. So whatever you feel more comfortable with, either you're moving them around with the widget handle or numerically, whatever you feel more comfortable with. And then you'll see me tumble and move the camera around. I'm just doing that with my mouse. So I hold down the Alt key, left mouse button allows me to circulate, right, zoom in and out, and in the middle, I can just pan around. So you've seen me create these simple primitive shapes and stuff. But the thing that you should know about all objects that are created in 3D, they all, for the most part, start from these very simple shapes. There's an old adage that says you can make anything from just starting with a cube. So, like you can either do a couple of different things. You can either take the primitive objects and make something out of these, which is a good challenge early on. You could take 3 spheres and stack them on top of each other, and you can build a snowman this way. And then you can take like something like this, like a cylinder. You can shorten it down, you can shrink it, and all of a sudden you can rotate it, and then this becomes like one of his eyes.
Oh.
And then you don't need to get super fancy with this stuff out of the gate in order to start making this. And then the cone can become his nose in the same way.
So do you think, Michael, that this is a software that kind of encourages that learning process? It seems like you're able to do the beginner kind of stuff, and maybe that helps you develop some fluency with the tools.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's a great way to get started. It's not like I said, it's not and then you can just take this and duplicate it, and this becomes the other eye here. And it's a great way of it's a tool, and there's a couple that you can use, right? There's Maya, there's Blender, there's some new stuff coming on the market. It's just I choose this for our students because this is both an industry standard. It has a lot of support out there. So if you have questions about things like and also it goes the whole range from very simple to very, very complex. So like every film that the company touts this, that it's basically like every film that's been up for an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects or Best Animation has, in one way or another, every year one of the nominees use this software. So
I'd probably tout that too.
Yeah, exactly. And whether I have no way of proving if that's true or not, but you can get there. So just by placing simple primitives, you can get there. You can also do things like, and this is actually this is where like the more complex stuff gets in. You do what's called extruding, and you've seen me up until this point just grab the entire object. You can also select just a face on it, and then what you can do is you can extrude that, which will allow you, which is a weird term, but it basically allows you just to add extra stuff. And you can start to shape it this way. So like,
oh, cool.
And then you can just continue to do that along the way. And after a while, you can kind of start to build different objects. Like this could become like a pipe or something. Then you can start to rotate this around.
So it allows you to turn
so
like a two-dimensional surface or shape into something that's multi-dimensional.
Right, exactly. So everything that you've ever seen built ends up like this, or starts off like this. So eventually you can push and pull those objects to a point where they start to become like hair like this. They become a face like this. They become like, you can see the eyes are just straight spheres. And then this is a little mock-up of a scene that we use a lot. And you can see this is a good example of 3D. Just you only use what you absolutely need. So this was just for a shot that was just like this, and you don't actually need the lower half of his chest, so we didn't make that. And this was done by one of the artists that contributed to our online school. So I just said we, and I just want to make sure that I did not make this. So that's pretty much the gist of modeling. So that's how you get these complex shapes from something simple. You start with like a cube or a sphere, and then you're able to push and pull, and you can kind of sculpt things around in order to get
extrude.
You can extrude.
Extruding.
And extrusion is just one of the tools. There's a ton of other ones. And like I said, we go through most of them in the course. So if you're curious about that, that's a big part of that. The other. Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a couple of questions about young animators starting out. Is this a software? Oops, let me pull that out. Is this a software that is a good starting place to learn? And it sounds like what you're saying is, there might be lots of maybe more user-friendly for beginners type of software, but this is one that will maybe look the best on our resume because it's such an industry standard.
Yeah,
or it's a competency
there's a few. There's like there's one called Houdini, which is more complex than Maya, which I would not recommend for new users. So the two starter ones would either be, I would say, Maya or Blender. Blender is very popular because it's free. And it's supported just by the community, but very few studios use it because of the lack of technical support that a free software provides. So, like our students get access to Maya for free because they have a student license. So all students get access to it. But I would recommend using Maya as a starting point. But the thing too that you need to know is that once you learn, the hardest software to learn is the first one, but transitioning from the first to the second is,
to others, you have fluency.
Because you have fluency, because it's all about everyone thinks it's all about like knowing where all the buttons are. That is a challenge, but once you get over that hurdle, it's about like a mastery of a craft, right? Like it's just doing it better. Like, and the artists at Pixar, at Disney, at Blue Sky, and all the studios that make this stuff, we don't have access to better tools than you have here in Maya. It's just people with more experience who've done it for longer.
Right, you just leveled up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. So I'm sneaking ahead here. And how do you make the wrinkles on the face look so real and the wrinkles on the shirt?
Wrinkles. That's a
wrinkles. One. So that's another one. Let me start sharing my screen again, and I'll hop into that.
Okay, let me, as you're pulling that up, let me ask, what level would we put wrinkles at in terms of the type of difficulty? Like, are wrinkles something that you can do fairly early on as you're learning, or is that like
it takes a little time. So a lot of this is like looking at reference, because in your head you'll say, oh, I want wrinkles, but like, what do wrinkles actually look like? Let's just look at this like little blanket that's going over here. Like you have to understand that they undulate up and down, that they kind of go through. And one of the like a way that we would do wrinkles is literally you just take these edges and you just start pulling them up and down. There is, now don't get me wrong, there is software that allows you to kind of sculpt this stuff a little more naturally. Like there's something called ZBrush that's very popular, and I'll show you another one here in just a sec. But like this is basically how you create some of this stuff, is you just kind of, but like in order to get it to look right, you can't just like push and pull the values. You actually have to look at a photograph of a blanket, or you like have to have a blanket laying next to you and like watch how high the ridges go up, how smooth they are, in order to kind of duplicate that out well.
And it looks like maybe shadow does the shadow create itself when you move the?
So I'll show you that. Actually, let me show you that real quick. So in terms of light and shadow, that is something else that gets added to the scene. So let me just pull this up here real quick. So this is something that is a pretty relatively new feature to our industry, which is something called it's, I mean, now it's, I guess it's pretty common, but it's called an IPR renderer, which what that means is before we used to have to, it would take a long time you'd have to wait a while for something to process before you could actually see anything, which
before you could know if you were on the right track.
Right. So now we have these little windows here that actually update in pretty close to real time. That will allow you to. Got a lot of stuff going on my computer here, so forgive me if it's a little bit slow, but that will allow you to create the lights and create the shadow effects pretty quickly.
And you can tell right away.
So this was, my job for years was just this, basically, just taking lights, positioning them around a character, lighting up the environments, making them look like daytime or nighttime, making them have a certain emotion. Like lots of times, you'd work with a director who would say like, hey, we really need this scene to feel romantic, or we need this to feel scary, or we need to feel like a little bit intimidated on what's going on here. And that was
I'm feeling anxiety from this.
Exactly.
Now.
And so what I always say when you're lighting something is the three biggest things you have to be aware of is you have to create you have to obviously set the mood. You have to like tell the audience more or less how they're supposed to be feeling about the situation.
Right.
You have to create visual shaping, which is light to dark fall off across the character. And then you have to direct the viewer's eye. So you have to make sure that the audience knows what they're looking at. And I'll demonstrate that here in a minute too. So this is basically lighting. There are a bunch of different lights that you can add. I just added a spotlight, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's like a spotlight from, think of like a theater spotlight. As if you go to see a play,
straight on, full illumination.
Yeah. It's just like a point that shines in one direction, and you can direct that around. This light that I just added is called a sky dome light. It's meant to simulate the light of like literally the sky and what the sky would look like if the character was outside.
Oh.
And then there are different ones within that as well. There's like an area light, which is meant to be. Oh, that's looking great. But you can see all I'm doing now is
cool.
I adjust so I'll adjust the values of the light. You adjust the, like a sunshiny day, the light's going to be a little bit on the warmer side. So you're going to want to feel that warmth on his face, and do things like that. So now, like, even though there is nothing going on in the scene, and I can actually turn that to be completely black, like you can see a little bit of the blue value in his shadowy areas and the warmth in the skin. Right. It kind of starts to feel like he's sitting on a couch outside. In fact, let me skip ahead here just a second, and I want to show you guys. So this is a lit scene that I made with him, and this is, since we're talking about lighting, this is kind of and I'll show you guys like a little walkthrough on how we get to this point. So for starters, when I first started lighting this, I was like, oh, I'll just get this image and I'll put him over top of this, and like that'll be cool. And as you can see, you saw me add a couple lights to the character.
Yeah.
In this example, it's like similar to a photography. There's a key light, a fill light, and then a little bit of a rim light. And then what you can do is you start mixing these together, and then they start to, like, the balance of them really plays a large role in how this character is reading. So like, yeah. So if you want him to feel like darker and a little bit grimmer, you would take down the fill value. If it was like a 1950s comedy, you'd want that to be a lot higher, so there's not a lot of shadows in the scene, that kind of thing.
And as you're deciding this, do you have, so we have a couple questions about the background element. Are you taking the background into consideration as you're doing this kind of character lighting, or is that something that comes later?
For sure, yeah. Like you kind of consider what's going on. So like when I was looking at this background, I was paying attention to which way the shadows were coming, and actually I realized I was looking at this and I was like, oh, I've got the shadow. So I was kind of like, I wanted the light to come in from the screen right side. So I flipped it around so that the shadows were going this way. Side. And like normally when you're doing films and stuff, this will all be like 3D geometry. But just for this example, I just threw that back there. And the reason why I did that was I wanted to exemplify one of the points that we have, which is that when I'm working on this stuff, sometimes it's like, you know what, like this color in this background just isn't working for me. It's just too similar to his skin tone. It's too much like him. And so what I did ultimately was I switched out for this bluer one, because what I wanted was the warmth of his skin to pop off from the background. And so I got this, same light direction. But you definitely will analyze if you're using a background plate, or if you're trying to, like, because that's a big part of our industry too, is matching CG characters, CG objects into live, what we call live action plates, which are just photographed or filmed backgrounds. So that was a quick overview of something like this, but it's like, there's a ton that goes, a ton of like these little things that go into this that kind of help define the final look. I'm going to shut this down just so this doesn't eat any more memory. And I want to show you guys this one too, real quick, while we still have some time. And then I'll do this for about 5 minutes, and then I'll open it up to some more Q&A. Cool. So this software is called 3D Painter. And this is a really, really great way of exemplifying the shaders, right? Which was in the materials, which is basically, like I said, making the skin look like skin, making wood look like wood, all that stuff. So this is a little character that comes standard with this software, and I'm just going to focus in on his head. And one of the things that's fun and incredible about doing material work is what I was mentioning before about finding reference is you always want to find reference in your work, because you're trying to replicate, like, and even though if you're not even doing like real, like photo real stuff, you still want to replicate it a little bit. Because like, I'll go and show you. So I'm going to build something here that's, imagine this object was actually made out of concrete. And so we're going to start with this as like the concrete base, right? Now this feels a little bit heavier. Like, and let's imagine,
it's heavy.
Yeah, it's heavier, right? It just all of a sudden got a lot heavier. And now we want to make this fancy, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to paint this with gold. So the way this software works is kind of is matches reality a little bit. So like when I add gold on top of this, it actually like you can see it actually kind of takes the rigid property underneath it, right? And let's say that this is this is what I just created is going to, like, let's say it's in our house, it's going to sit on our end table, it's brand new, it's clean, it's amazing. But one of the things that's really difficult about what we do is when things aren't brand new, when they're aged, when they're broken down, when they've seen some things, and they've got some wear and tear on them. So one of the things that this software does really well is it really helps build that realism level by adding things like let's say we wanted to add like dirt on top of this, right? So what we would do is we would add a layer on top. We'd pick a color that was kind of reminiscent of dirt, kind of something like along this line, and then right now, also we would change the roughness, because you can see it's kind of shimmery. Dirt isn't like that; it's more like this. And what we would do is we would take this layer and we would say, you know what, we want it to only be in certain areas. You can do that by adding masks. And masks are just a simple way of saying like where you want something to exist and where you don't. Like if I painted this here, you would see, okay, then all of a sudden this is dirt versus the rest of it, which isn't, which is still that gold. But instead of hand painting it, what you can actually do is you can actually, there's what's called a procedural generator, which is really, really cool, that allows you to add dirt to it. And you have these sliders that control just how dirty stuff is. And actually, let me change this to make this a little bit darker. So you can kind of see, maybe a little bit redder too. So you can kind of see, so like the dirt kind of builds up in these crevices a little bit more.
Get it in the crevices.
Yeah, exactly. And then, and it kind of just like mucks up the rest of the surface a little bit. And then if you wanted to erode some of this stuff, if you wanted to create some rust around the edges, there's a really cool generator for that too. You just pop some rust on top. Now this is kind of everywhere. Again, a black mask because you don't want it to appear everywhere. You just want it to appear in the areas that make sense for rust to appear.
This is where those references help, right?
So you're like, how much wear and tear is there really? And really, when you're doing like gold statues and stuff, like you'll notice that it doesn't actually rust like this. This doesn't actually look right. What ends up happening is it becomes like a little bit like it's almost like a dark black type thing starts to form, and you can see that without and it kind of just chips away, and you can kind of see the underbelly. At the same time, you can also like do things like on this gold where you can make it feel like maybe we did a pretty bad job of painting it. And so there's concrete here underneath it. And so instead of that's weird. Oh wait, I lost it. There we go. That's why. Sorry. Fill, and then here, and that now you can see it's like kind of cracked up, like it's just paint that's kind of just starting to peel away from it a little bit. So it only is So, so this is how like all of those shaders get developed for it. And like I said, you can do anything from this type of stuff. You can add. I always feel bad. Like it's always weird adding skin to things that aren't skin. They just feel weird. But you can make it look like car paint, which is always cool. Shiny thing. So that's yeah. So that's kind of an intro to this stuff. And let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. We can talk a little more. So that's kind of the basis of building animation. Oh, there was one more thing I wanted to show you guys. Let me get that set up real quick. And then because again, if we're talking about animation, one of the things that is cool is that, you know, in the software, I was showing you how you can how like, you know, you can set stuff up. It's still loading. How you can set stuff up so it like, you know, so and everything I showed you guys was pretty static. But here is, and this isn't the actual Woody doll from the film, but it's a user made this. And the way that we're able to get all of the animation done is through all of this stuff on it. And this is called the rig. And this is the skeletal structure I was mentioning before. So this actually allows us to rotate, to stretch and squatch and stretch him around a little bit, to rotate his head through all these controls. And actually, an animator will, the way that they build the performance is off of controlling all of these and setting what we call keyframes. So if I wanted to control his eyes moving, just like rotate, I probably could have done a less creepy way of doing this, but if I want to just like shift his eyes from one area to another, you'll like set keyframes. And then over the course of the shot, he'll move back and forth. And like, if you wanted to make him bounce up and down while he's doing that, lower this down, set that keyframe, move along the time slider here to something later, have him jump up. And so now he's just bouncing up and down. So every single one of these elements are the way that an animator actually controls the way that the character moves in the shot. And I wanted to mention that because I'm sure some of us are interested in the animation side of things too, and what that looks like and what that workflow looks like.
Yeah, and there were a couple of questions in there too about CGI.
Mm-hmm.
Is there? I don't know. Can you just talk a little bit about how does Maya integrate with CGI? Is that something that comes at a later phase of the process? Like, how does that?
Yeah, so CGI is the term is computer generated imagery. So what we do in Maya, what we do in all these softwares is part of that process. It's using the computer to generate objects, characters, and all that stuff. Usually, when you talk about CGI, it's about integrating that into an environment,
Live action kind
into
of
live
stuff.
action. Exactly. Yeah. Good recall. And so that happens. So that happens outside of Maya, and that other software that I was showing you when I was kind of piecing together the elements over the backplate. That is a very rudimentary way of integrating CG objects into a live action backplate. Like you would take the footage into that file, you take all the CG elements in that file, and then you have to light it in a certain way to make it looks like it fits in the scene. You have to make the shadows interact with the surroundings. It's always a two-way street. You have to make the character feel like they're in the set by having the shadow cast and making sure that, like, if a car drives by them, that they get the light from that, and then also that the character, and then you have to adjust the live action plate. So if the CG character walks past a window, you see the reflection of the character in the window.
Right. Okay. So on that, along those lines, are there things like, is this part of what an animator or somebody who's working with a software like Maya, would this be like a source of occupational frustration to go back and forth between trying to make sure that you're integrated in the right way, that the thing that you're developing is, does that make sense?
It's an occupational frustration, but it's a thing that we love. Like it's
part of the creative.
Yeah, it's the tediousness of the task that we enjoy, because when you get it right, it feels great, right? And it's hard to get it. It's really hard to get it right. And
when you do, it's the least likely to be noticed, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Like well, sometimes the best work that you can do never gets noticed because it's so seamless. An example, and this is from a long time ago. There's an old, it's from the '90s Jack Nicholson film, As Good as It Gets, which you don't think of as being like a CG visual effects movie. Yeah, but one of my professors told me this story about the proudest work he ever did was on that film, and it was because they spent all this money to get on location in New York, and they shot this scene. Jack Nicholson, Helen Hunt, expensive actors. And the film got destroyed. Like the film got messed up. And they looked into reshooting, and it was just too expensive. So they sent it to this visual effects company who cleaned up everything and made it look and restored it to as best they could. And nobody ever noticed. Nobody ever said, like, that looks strange. Like they didn't have to reshoot anything. And he said that he'll never win an award for it. He'll never do any of that, but like it was the best work he ever did.
Wait, where in the movie is it? Because I love this.
He refused to tell us.
It's like
he
secret.
Refused to tell us the actual. Okay. Yeah, but it's definitely, it would have to be an exterior shot in New York City. Right. It has to be one of those.
I love it. I like going back to movies and rewatching it from the perspective of creators. I used to. So what you're talking about is making me think of. I used to work at TED, and specifically, I worked on the TED Ed team. So we create animations that are educational videos. But there was a talk by a woman named Danielle Feinberg, who I believe worked on lighting for Pixar movies, and it was incredible.
She's like my icon. I love her. She's amazing.
Well, I hadn't previously known about, because like what you're saying, the better you are at this, the less likely it is that it will stand out in a way that people are paying attention to it, right? But she would put up kind of like you were just showing here, we wanted to create this atmosphere. So here's what we did with the lighting. It's just kind of mind-boggling, and we have a lot of questions coming in here, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on personality development of characters. So you talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but but we had some folks ask about facial expressions and whether or not, if you have multiple people working on this process at different stages, how do those pieces come together to create a cohesive character, right? Who comes in and sits down in the chair and you're like, yep, that's the character.
Right. So yeah, so totally. There's usually in films, each character gets assigned a lead or a team who's in charge of determining that stuff really early in the process. And people ask like, well, how long does it take to make these films? And it's generally like 3 to 4 years, 3 years total, start to finish. And a lot of that time is developing the stuff. And so there is small teams, again, individuals who go around for each character, and they determine how they sit, how they move, how they walk. And literally there are books, they're called style guides, that will tell you everything you need to know about this character. So if you're an animator just starting on the project and you're like, okay, the main character from Spies in Disguise was this guy named Lance, and he was the world's greatest spy, super confident, and there were rules about Lance that you could not do. There were one animator I was talking to about this, pitched this idea of okay, he's walking to his car, he drops his keys, picks up his keys, and they're like, nope, Lance would never drop his keys. Lance doesn't make mistakes like that. He doesn't
drop things.
He doesn't drop things. He's so smooth that everything in his life is so easy. So that was some of the stuff. Everything about him was so physically
Lance
easy.
Doesn't drop things.
Doesn't drop his keys.
I love that. I mean, the style guides that I am used to are typefaces and font sizes and things.
But
it's very cool.
It's similar in their outcome because it's about think about a style guide for a brand. It's you're establishing a brand identity, right?
Right.
Apple always has very clean things and just their logo and just this and just that. And you would never do that. Same thing with the characters. You want them to have an identity. And in terms of getting that right, is that these leads and the directors are so in touch with the characters. They're so in touch with the way they move. And we go through a process called dailies, which are yeah. So a basic when you're an artist on an animated film, your basic day is you have your assignments, you have your shots that you work on. At the end of the day, we do this process which is called rendering. I was kind of showing where you make the final image from the CG objects. That usually takes a while, so you let that bake overnight, and then you come in the next morning and you go to dailies. And dailies are, you take what you did the day before and you show to the director or the art director or your supervisor or the character leads, and you say this is what I've got today. And they'll look at it and they'll give you feedback on it, and they'll tell you, again, in order to keep the consistency, when never put Lance's chin back like this, always keep him up, always keep his head he's always up like this, right? Or whatever the thing is. And then it's just noodling. Then we'll noodle that, and then we go and then we make those adjustments, and we go back the next day. And that process is tedious. Again, we had over 100 animators on each show by the end. And so your quota roughly for an animator, it ended up pacing out to be a second or two of animation per week to get that out. So it was just there's nothing that slips through the cracks. I take that back. Things slip through the cracks sometimes, but very, 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 very little slips through the cracks sometimes. Mistakes happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So along those lines of the dailies, the number of people who are working on developing a particular character. You talked a little bit at the beginning of the session about how you got started. We have some folks who are asking, how do you become an animator? How does one find their niche in this landscape? And I'm curious to know, what are some of the common paths that might land somebody in a position where they're like, oh, I want to be a character lead on an animated film, or I want to do lighting, that kind of
thing. So it's a great question. So I'm going to address the question of finding your niche first. The best example of this that I can give is most of us in the industry landed here because we watched these films growing up, and we became attracted to an element of them. Right? We love them. Mine was Finding Nemo, and what happened to me was I watched the movie, I loved it. I tell the story that I'd gotten the DVD from Netflix when they still did that, and I just didn't want to get up from the couch yet, so I started flipping through the behind the scenes of it, and they showed these artists scuba diving off the coast of Australia in order to get the look of the film. So they talked about how when the journey started, they were out at open sea and the water was blue and clear, and that meant this, and that set this mood. And then as they got closer to Sydney, the tension grew, and so the water got murkier and darker. And there would be with these people called lighting artists that helped communicate that. And I didn't know any of that existed. And I was like, that's what I want to do with my life. I was just out of art school. I was bartending, and I was like, nope, don't want to bartend anymore. I want to do that. And that's
going to Sydney.
Right.
Turn oceans into moods.
I never got assigned to go scuba diving. That never happened.
There's still time.
There's still time. But the thing that I say about that was I was inspired by the visuals of the film. The people that I worked with on the lighting side, the texturing side, are inspired by the look, whether it's the haze in WALL-E, whether it's the beautiful landscape in Luca, or how Harlem just came to life in Seoul, which was gorgeous. It was so beautiful, and like I live,
in the bridge in the afterlife.
Oh yeah. Well, the one that got me was I live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I live close to Harlem, and I would walk through Harlem on my way to the train, and that movie felt like Harlem more than, and I was like, man, it's just like you could, people who are, they just nailed it, man. And so that got me. Anyway, so, but if you pay attention to that, you're probably meant to be focused more on like the lighting side or the look side of it. But if you watch those films and you are blown away by the performance of the characters, and you find yourself gravitating towards the character performance, then animation's probably your jam. That's what people, they watch the way that Bugs Bunny moved. They watch the way that, like, they study. They're more aware of that side of it. In terms of getting into it and doing it as a job, I mean, that's why we started the online school. Was that when I was doing it, the only way to do it was kind of traditional schooling, which is, as you know, it's very expensive and it's very time consuming and often requires you to move away from where you want to live. And so we started the online school so that people can realistically, affordably, get their foot in the door and learn what they need to learn in order to get their first job. And the way that we like to think about it at our school, at the Academy of Animated Art, is that we know that the only way to get good at this is to do it, is to learn how to do it and to do it and then do it and then receive feedback from professionals who know what they're talking about, and then allow you to improve. It's only there's an old drawing adage that says that, like, everybody has 10,000 bad drawings in them, and the faster you can get those out of your body, the faster you get those out, the good ones start coming. It's the same way.
I might have more than that.
Right, I've got it. It's pretty endless supply. So but that's the idea, is that in order to get good at this, and this is really hard because you can see it and you can feel it and you know what it's supposed to be like, but for so long when you're first starting, what you're making isn't up to that level yet, right? Like it's just not. It's still a little bit of a struggle. So
get to know these tools and
it's like it becomes more comfortable and eventually, like the way that for a carpenter or a chef, the tools kind of start to melt away and you focus on what you're making more.
It feels like muscle.
That's
a great way of putting it. I would love for everyone who's here to join me in thanking Michael Tanzillo for joining us today and sharing this wisdom. I'm curious to know what pieces of what you learned today are you most excited about? We've had lots of really great feedback about the collaborative elements of this and how you can build whole environments and individuals and personalities. So yeah, join me in thanking Michael for sharing his wisdom. Also, the link to his course is at the top of the comments there on YouTube. Check it out. Do you want to, as folks are doing that, do you want to just say a few words about what's available in the course that people will get in addition to kind of like the basics of Maya?
So our online school, like I said, we have courses like the Introduction to Maya, which it's taking that software and you'll learn the ins and outs of it. Our big bundle that we're doing right now is our Lighting for Animation bundle, which is taking somebody who has a rough knowledge of 3D, again, who like can take that Intro to Maya class and go from that level of just having those skills to having a full skill set. And what I was showing at the beginning of this was my demo reel, all the shots that I worked on, and we use that to get jobs. So in order to get a job in this industry, you have to have a demo reel filled with shots that you've worked on that demonstrate that you have the skills to perform the task in a professional environment. We give you all the tools, the training, all the animated scenes, everything that you could need to build a demo reel to get you your first job. So we have everything from this very basic level, like I said, the Intro to Maya, to an entire structure of courses that you can use to get a job. And we go from everything from like how to light this stuff to how to interview for a job, how to salary negotiate, like all the things that you wish people taught you in school. We'll cover those in our courses.
That is high value. So yeah, Nicole Nations is asking, like, how do you break into this industry? And that's great to know. Yeah. So it seems like what you go into in this course is not just the foundations of the foundation of the tools, but also like, here's how this industry works and how you can go into it being prepared and like presenting the best version of yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So like I said, if for anyone who's watching this on recording too, if you want to reach out to me or live, my email is mike@academyofanimatedart.com. If you go to the academyofanimatedart.com website, send a message there. I'll get that. We're not that big, so it's just me and a couple other people. So I will get that message and I will respond. So thank you guys so much for letting me chat with you today. I appreciate it. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, this has been terrific. Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate it.
Guys. Yeah, and like I said, reach out anytime. And Ashley, it's been great. Thank you you're an amazing moderator. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Looking forward to seeing some great animated content out there.
All right. See you all very soon.
Bye.